Welcome to the first formal recording of Not Just Research Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Lee. In my day job, I work on AI and ML and creative tools. In this podcast, we talk about work, career, investment, life, and sometimes research. In this episode, Cat and I will talk about layoff, which has become more common in mid to late 2022. Hey, Cat, how are you?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Excited for this episode. So, for those who are not following the tech news recently, can you say a little bit about what's going on with the layoff situation?
Yeah. Recently, there are like many tech companies started to lay off people, and then, of course, before they lay off, they started to think about like whether they should freeze hiring. So then that means like the opportunity to get into another company is getting narrower and narrower. But then layoff happened to some of those companies, and people come out, and it's just like not very easy to find a new job, like in 2021.
To rephrase what you're saying, basically, hiring freeze usually will indicate maybe later on there will be layoff, but hiring freeze is the first kind of stage. Is that right?
I think there's a pattern, right? So first of all, if there is a hiring freeze, is it still open to backfill? That means if someone left the company, left the team, does the team get the headcount back so that they can hire another person to replace the person that left, right? So if there's no backfill, then it looks bad, and then potentially there may be a layoff coming.
Yeah, so usually in this layoff, like I'm a researcher position, I think you are a engineering position. So what kind of roles are affected the most usually in this layoff and hiring freezes?
Wow, that's hard to predict. I think like it depends on the nature of the company, right? Some company they just lay off people based on like the new headcount planning. Like if every team they reduce a little bit headcount, they lay off people here and there, and ask each team to identify a few people to lay off. But for some, they have like larger scale organizational structural change. Then they just stop working on some big items, and then the whole organization working on that big item would be just gone. Maybe there's chance for those people to find new jobs within the company. Maybe not, then they will leave the company.
Yeah, so usually you said like sometimes a whole org or whole team is just eliminated. How, as an employee, how can we tell which teams or which groups or which orgs are more likely to be the victim of this?
Wow, if you can tell, you can do a lot of things. Usually you cannot, right? If you can predict this, you can predict a lot of more valuable things than your own job. You don't even have to do this job. You can make money elsewhere if you can predict this. And also, for some companies, they have a philosophy of like when this needs to happen, it has to happen like right away, because they don't want people to feel bad and then waiting for the actual news to come to them about whether each of them would be laid off. So they would make this kind of decision at a very, very high level, like executive level, and then just announce and execute within the same day. So then, like, even a lot of frontline managers, they don't have the decision, or they don't have the knowledge about this is going to happen. So I don't think it's easy to predict. But broadly speaking, I mean, you can look at a few things, right? Number one, whether this team or organization is a profit center or cost center. If the layoff is not purely due to like organizational restructuring, it's mostly due to economies, then, well, profit center is more likely to stay than cost center, because the company needs you to make more money for them. And then also for certain companies that they have very clear focus, say they have just a few OKRs, like less than 10 OKRs on top of their annual planning, then they might just keep those top OKR teams, because those teams need to deliver the OKR and they already plan for it, and then maybe they have very high hope of those like few things delivered and then make a profit or something like that. If that's the case, then this kind of company level goals the teams associated with them are less likely to get laid off, I think. But of course, nothing is guaranteed. Like everything we discuss here, we are not trying to make any prediction or help anybody to make prediction. We're just like trying to look back at the history and see how things usually play out. But there's always outliers.
Yeah. So can you talk a bit about like which teams are usually profit center and which teams are cost centers?
Sure. Like if you think about Google and Facebook, they are big on making money from ads. Then of course the ads organization is the profit center for sure. And then a lot of other things like the product teams, those are more likely to be cost center because when you build product, well, it depends on whether this specific product is already monetizable for ads if they are within this two large company. Right? If they're not even monetizable, it's just, it's a very engaging product. People love to use it, but then users' love doesn't translate to money directly. So there's a risk there, right? But for other kind of business, then it depends on the nature of the business. Say Uber makes money from having drivers and passengers, right? They cannot cut down one and leaving the other at scale because both needs to match each other. Airbnb needs to have hosts, but also needs to have guests so that it can make money in between. This kind of marketplace, especially two-sided markets, they need to have teams to keep the two-sided market operational. If it's like financial technologies, then it depends on where the money comes from in specific cases.
Yeah. That's very helpful. So since I'm a researcher, so I will ask more questions about like research, like org. So in your definition, it seems like research org is usually a cost center because we don't directly publish products, we don't directly make revenue. So what do you think of all this? Facebook and Google and Apple, and I work at Adobe. All this company, we have a huge research org, and what do you think will happen there?
Yeah. I think like in many cases, even before the layoff, research department is usually the first department to take a headcount freeze, right? Like, the economy is not doing as well as we expected, then let's stop hiring researchers first. Layoff, I don't know how to say, but if the company really needs to save money from layoff, then research department could be one thing that is like higher on their list to consider. Of course, it's for them to consider. The executive need to figure out what they want, what they can let go, right?
Yeah. What are the other things that you want to share about your like thoughts around layoff?
Yeah, I think like from my observation in this year's layoff, it's the job market. I think it's like pretty bad for junior new grads because when a company stops hiring, usually they stop hiring like more junior people because in tech industry a lot of times when you hire junior people it's kind of like investment, right? So you help them grow, you hope they grow and stay, and then one day they become more senior and then they are actually making more and more contribution. You're not just saying that, I pay you this much as a junior, and then that's already like good enough for the work you provide to us. It's more like, okay, you provide your work, but more importantly, you grow, and then hopefully one day you can have a higher output that actually justify your pay. Right? Yeah. So once this company like shutting down hiring junior people, for example, like Facebook, right? Facebook, when they stopped hiring, they first announced that they would freeze hiring from like junior to senior and then to staff, and then they only keep hiring senior staff engineers. So there's a very high bar, right? Senior staff engineer is like the top 1% of the total engineer population inside Facebook. So if you can match the top 1% of the engineers in Facebook, you can still join. But if you're not, then you're out of luck. So, okay, not every company operates like that, but generally speaking, the trend is stop hiring junior people first and only hire those who can join and immediately make some big impact on the financials. So that means like senior staff or even senior staff. I see the job market being pretty bad for junior people.
This particular hiring freeze is leading to a lot of layoffs, and we also know we're in this like maybe we're already in a recession, or maybe a recession is coming next year. I don't know. There are a lot of news talking about recession. So do you think this layoff will last for years or months? What's your opinion?
For me, I think like I don't know. Of course, I cannot predict the economy, right? That's what the Fed needs to think about. That's not my job. But for me, I'm kind of optimistic about the layoff will stop after a while, after the company figure out like how to stay afloat. Because for these companies, well, the best way to save most of the money is like just shut down your operation, lay off everybody, return all the cash to the shareholders. That's the ultimate, right? But of course, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is like, okay, stop the sinking process and try to find a way to stay afloat. And that's why you do the layoff. And also, there's one reason why within tech, layoff it's a common thing. That's just my own speculation, right? Because in tech, large portion of the compensation is the company's stocks. And when the economy goes down, usually the stock market goes down as well. And then that means people are not happy with their total compensation going down. A large portion of the total compensation is like heavily reduced value, right? Now, the companies have two choices. They can let the employees to feel upset, and then some of them choose to leave the company and some choose to stay. The other one is proactively determining which person, which department needs to go, right? If you do it passively, it's more likely that the more talented people would choose to leave because they have options. It's easy for them to get an offer from elsewhere. They will leave, right? And then for other people that they just want to stay, they want to like contribute less, or the modern way to say it is like quiet quitting, right? So for the people who wants to quiet quit, they will stay, but then actually as the company, they don't want this kind of people to just stay here and take the compensation, right? So usually that means approaching this passively is not a good choice. Then the company needs to take a more proactive approach. That's probably like reduce the workforce, but then potentially concentrate the remaining of the stock pool to the people who are staying behind. Usually for people who are at higher level, due to they like learn faster, grow faster. Usually that's the outcome, right? So then for this kind of people, if they push to learn faster and grow faster in the earlier stage of the career, then that means that they are just willing to work harder, especially work harder towards a new opportunity if the existing opportunity is like value reduced.
Yeah, I like the way you're putting it. Yeah. So I think some like right now our podcast is just starting, so I don't think there will be a lot of audience. But one growing audience I can envision for this podcast is new college graduates. So if for those who are graduating this year, what do you want to say to them? Because a lot of hiring freezes going on, and as you said, like junior people are not hired at many companies, only hiring senior staff level, which I'm not at that level. I don't know if you're at that level, but basically it's far from most new college grads reach.
Yeah, so I think like staying like positive, persevere. Those would be what I can recommend, right? The only thing you can do is persevere through this challenging time. I see that like job seeking with larger companies in your mind is very different than job seeking targeting a lot of smaller companies. Because for larger companies, their hiring process is actually more predictable. and it's well known from all the online material you can find. Even if you don't find the exact problem, right? You know their format, you know they are about to get signals about like this and that, like your coding skill, your system design skill, your behavior, and down to what exact behavior they are looking for each company, right? Like Amazon looks for leadership principles. Okay, those things you can research, you can figure out, and then you can prepare better with the knowledge. But if the big companies are stop hiring, then people need to look for jobs from smaller companies. And now there's not enough information about each smaller company for you to prepare in an optimal way. So then I would say it's more like a numbers game that you need to apply to a lot of companies. Maybe many would reject you on the resume, and then you get a few interviews, and then still like a large portion of the interviews would not move towards an offer. But eventually, like when you have a large enough number in your job applications, you may get some offers.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is the larger companies might be like having freezes, but smaller companies like startups, not all of them are pausing. So for new college grads, they can still look for jobs at those smaller companies.
Yeah, not necessarily startups, right? There are also technologies workers in, say, traditional industries or SMB, small to medium business, right? So they might not have the high growth like a startup or high compensation like big tech. But if you want to just start from somewhere instead of waiting for the economy to recover, then at least those industries provide opportunity.
Can you give a few examples so that listeners can kind of have a starting place?
I never try to do this by myself, so it's more about like the experience I heard from other people, right?
Yeah.
So they go online to those job application websites like LinkedIn, hire.com, all those websites. Then they can look up who is hiring for what kind of roles or require what kinds of skills. And then they will try to find a match and then apply to those companies. And then a lot of like small to medium business, they're actually like not being so famous and public facing like a big tech, right? So then their hiring pipeline is more from those places. And they don't hire a lot of people, maybe they just hire a few. But then if you are a good match, eventually you got an offer, then you got an offer. But this is like, if we think in like an algorithm perspective, right? When you apply to a big tech, the big tech needs to filter a few hundred people every year from a huge candidate pool. But no matter what, it's more like an ON problem, right? Because it's them going through just like large candidate pool. For you, you have a constant of like, fan company, there are like 5 of them, 4 of them, right? If we count the unicorns, there may be like a few hundreds of them, but then you can count. And then you only apply to those that are relevant to you. But then once you go into the area of applying to small to medium-sized business or like other traditional industries, then it becomes an ON square problem or OMN problem, right? There's N candidates and M companies. Both numbers are huge and they try to match with each other. And then, of course, it's not efficient at all, but that's the way to go.
That's interesting. Turning from a linear matching to a like a square matching. Okay, so is there any other thing you want to share about layoff, this topic generally?
Don't do it in a passive way. You need to prepare for it, right? It's just like you need to keep yourself prepared in case you want to look for a new job. Don't work in a company and be very passive about like finding new opportunities, because you never know whether that some layoff might hit you. And then if you are working very passively, you are kind of actually quiet quitting, and now you don't have much to say on your resume. and then you might not have a very sharp skill to just start jumping into interviews, right? So I think that's one of the suggestions I would have is like as long as the layoff doesn't hit your road yet, just focus on putting out high quality work so that like you maintain generating good content for your resume. That's how I would frame it, right? So that like if like tomorrow there's a layoff and then you say goodbye to your company, you will still be able to write like, hey, I was making this high impact in that company even till my last day, right? Instead of, oh, there's a blank here because, well, I'm trying to quiet quitting during that 6 months and then eventually they kick me out.
Yeah.
Right. So put out some good work so that you keep generating high quality like information that you can put into your resume, and when like new employer asks you about those things, you can actually like present them. So those work would reflect like your value.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, before I let you go, so I think today is the first time I hear the word quiet quitting. So what's the context there? And I mean the word, once you say it out loud, I think I get what it means. But can you explain a little bit more on this term?
I my impression of this phrase is like becoming disengaged at work and trying to do the minimum to just get by, maybe just passing the performance review at the like lowest acceptable rating, right? That kind of stuff, instead of trying to compete for a very high rating or compete for promotion. It's like, okay, what is the minimum rating that I can get while my employer is still thinking me being valuable to keep me around? I think that's quiet quitting. But of course, some people would push this to a more aggressive degree. That say they take up more than one jobs and then hiring those information from their employers, pretending that they work exclusively for one of them, but they are actually like just quiet quitting in both companies. But online, if you go to Reddit, you can read this kind of stories. A lot of people share their story on Reddit because they're anonymous. They are not afraid of telling their stories. But of course, there's no way for you to verify whether they are making it up or they are actually doing it.
Got it. Yeah, I think this very first episode, it's a great trial. I think the topic of layoff is very timely, and hope it helps someone. And I learned something from it. To actively not to be passive and just actively focus on the work that you're doing, so that you don't have a gap or you have like a blank in your resume. Yeah. All right. And all the YouTube audience, if you have any other topics you'd like to see us discuss, please leave a comment. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you next time. Bye.